Welcome to our latest Wandering Walks of Wonder walking history tour. Today we're headed to beautiful Siloam Springs, Arkansas. Our tour today begins in front of the American Legion Community Hall here in Siloam Springs. This beautiful building was constructed in 1934 by the Works Progress Administration and financed by the local American Legion to serve as a community building and meeting hall. The building itself uses typical WPA rustic style of architecture, as you can see with this cut stone and cast concrete walls. As we walk into Siloam Springs City Park, we'll learn not only about the park itself, but a little bit about the history of Siloam Springs itself. Siloam Springs City Park runs several hundred feet along Sager Creek just south of University Street in an area that was formerly called St. John Street. When the town was first platted, this area was set aside as a public park around what was then the Siloam Spring. The Siloam Spring was named in 1879, making it the first named spring in town. The springs in town were used for drinking, though, not for bathing. They were described as pure water that would flush disease-causing impurities from a person's body. At both the Twin and Siloam Springs, we'll see the Twin Springs here in just a little bit, there was a $5 fine for washing in the springs themselves. However, rock basins were constructed around both of these springs to keep the creek out of the spring, not to create a pool for bathing. As we head towards the gazebo, it was built originally in 1895. By the late 1830s, German immigrant Simon Sager and his family were living in what is now Siloam Springs. That makes them the first white settlers in the area. Sager's second cabin, which he built around 1845, still stands on the campus of John Brown University, not too far from here. The first town in this area was established in the 1840s by Caldine and Nancy Ward Gunter and called Hiko, a Cherokee word meaning sparkling water. This sparkling water refers to the abundance of natural springs that we see here. The Hiko post office was established in 1855. In 1880, Hiko merchant John Valentine Hargrove platted the town of Siloam Springs on land that he owned here around Sager Creek. Hargrove intended for the town to become a summer health resort because 8 of the 28 springs flowing into this part of Sager Creek were considered medicinal. Therefore, the town's name, Siloam, refers to the healing waters of the Pool of Siloam in the New Testament. Siloam Springs itself was incorporated in 1881, and a post office was established in 1882. The town experienced very rapid growth with over 2,200 people by December of 1881. However, there was no railroad in the Siloam Spring area until the mid-1880s, and many of the first residents by that time had left the area. Ahead of us is the Ewing House Annex, which was part of an old hotel called the Ewing House that was built in 1897. That building itself no longer exists, but this annex still does. It was known as the Park Hotel for about 50 years, up until around the 1950s or so. As we begin walking up University Avenue, we see here in front of us the Crown Hotel, which was originally called the Lakeside Hotel when it was constructed in 1881. This is actually the oldest building in downtown Siloam Springs. It was constructed just 1 year after the town was established as a health resort. It was named the Lakeside because of its close proximity to what was known as Siloam Lake. These buildings that we see in front of us were built sometime before 1897. They had five separate storefronts, with originally the upper part being residences. In 1908, this building housed two groceries, a dry goods store, an undertaker, and a racket store. By 1948, the last two storefronts were used as a hatchery for chickens. These buildings that we see here on our left are known as the old Zimmerman block buildings. They were constructed sometime around 1897. One of the earliest known businesses in Siloam Springs was Gilbrace, which was a dry goods store, and it resided and housed its operation inside one of these buildings. Ahead of us on our right as we cross the street is the old Crane Motor Company building, which was built in 1935. It originally was a Ford dealership. It was designed in what is called the Art Moderne or modern style, with smooth brick and tile wall surfaces, these glass brick wall buildings, and the rounded corner that gives it a very horizontal type look. The building across the street from us that has the Arvis logo at the top, which is a bank here in Arkansas, was originally built in 1900 and served as the post office until 1937, when another post office was completed on Broadway that we'll see here in just a few minutes. That building still has original cast iron columns that were made by the Neosho foundry in Neosho, Missouri. The home that we see here on our left is the Connolly Harrington House. It was built about 1920 as a single family residence for local businessman and banker Connolly Harrington. This house reflects many elements of the prairie and craftsman styles, with its very symmetrical facade, wide overhanging eaves, and a front massive porch. In the 1930s and 1940s, it was the John Brown University Hospital, and later it became the Ozark Hotel. Since then, it's been divided into apartments and offices. We're now heading into the downtown commercial historic district of Siloam Springs. Most of the buildings that we see as we walk here along the street were constructed in the late 1800s all the way up to around 1940 or so. This building that we see here, which is now Fat Tire Bike Shop, was a post office that was constructed in 1937. It's designed in the colonial revival, plain traditional style of architecture, as you can tell with its very symmetrical facade, multi-pane windows, and very little ornamentation on the building. Very typical of those buildings built in the mid 1930s. We're now heading into Twin Springs Park. This park was originally called Isle of Patmos. It was built sometime between 1914 and 1922, and the name was eventually changed to Twin Springs Park. The rock work at the Twin Springs themselves probably dates back to the late 1880s, when the medicinal springs were improved as part of the promotion of the area as a health resort. In 1908, there was one time an air dome summer theater in the park, which operated much like a drive in movie theater does today, but you walked in, sat down, and watched a movie. The fountain that we saw as we came in was built in 1936 and was created by the National Youth Administration as part of Depression era projects. Across the street from us is the old Methodist Episcopal Church. It was built in 1920 as the Methodist Episcopal Church South. It became the FUMC Church in 1938 after the Uniting Conference in 1938 ended the division between the Methodist South and the Methodist Episcopal North congregations. The building itself is now home to the Sager Creek Arts Center. I hope you've enjoyed this history walk through downtown Siloam Springs, Arkansas. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and we will see you on our next Wandering Walks of Wonder walking tour. Take care now. Bye bye.